Often that's a big part of what we need is to trust ourselves to make the decision and to know that we can navigate that hardship. And when we're lacking trust and confidence in ourselves, it's great to have a loved one who has the trust and confidence in us for us. Welcome to the Love Your Brain podcast, the podcast designed for everyday people who are ready to hop off the negative thought hamster wheel and enjoy a less hostile environment in their own brains. Our brains are where we live our entire lives, and I'm on a mission to help people see that they have everything they need to make it a happier place to be. So join us for this episode of the Love Your Brain podcast. Let's get started. Over these past few weeks, we have talked about all things related to decision making. We've talked about how to make decisions in a way that aligns with who we are at our core. We've talked about how to avoid pitfalls of outsourcing our decision making. We've talked about how to break free from regret. And we've talked about how to follow our intuition. But today is going to be a bonus episode in this series, and I say that because I did not plan on this being a part of the original decision making series, but I felt a nudge to go deep into this topic while putting together the other episodes and decided to add it. So I'm going to take you back to one of the previous episodes and read to you from the transcript of that episode, and you'll see maybe a little bit of where this inspiration came from. This is what I look for in a great therapist or even just my good friends. Those people that know you well and are able to actually point you back to who you are at your essence when you feel lost. Those people, they are really good at being objective. They can remind you of the things that are important to you, your values and your goals, and help you process through that decision from your lens a little more clearly. Well, that is exactly what we will be talking about today. How to be that person for someone you care about. How to show up for someone else in a meaningful way when they are at a crossroads, when they have a difficult decision to make, or maybe even when they're just struggling in general with life. And the reason I think this topic is so important is because, well, we all want to be that magical person for someone else in our lives, right? We want to be that person that is actually able to help someone navigate a challenging time. We want to be that person that we needed in life. And we can be. And the truth is, when we have a loved one struggle, whether they're trying to decide if they should change jobs, go back to school to pursue their education, where they should move to, heck, sometimes even those smaller decisions, like should I break up with my hairdresser? That can be a stressful thing too. When we have someone in our close circle that is having trouble making these type of decisions, we can also struggle because we don't know how best to support the other person. Sometimes we feel just as lost as they do. We want to be able to fix it for them because we don't like seeing them suffer in indecision, but we just don't know how. It often unexpectedly causes a lot of stress in our own lives. Not knowing how best to help them can really feel debilitating. You feel for them and you want to help them, but you just don't know the best way to do that. And so I thought, why not include this in the series as well? Although we'll be focusing mainly on helping a loved one with a difficult decision, a lot of these tools can really be used anytime you have a loved one going through something difficult. Because when it comes to those closest to us, when they're struggling, we're struggling too. So let's get started arming ourselves with some tools. The first tip I'm going to give you is that as hard as it is to do, it's important to detach from the outcome. And what I mean by that is try to be as neutral as possible. Be objective when you're going to help someone you care about navigate a difficult decision. Once you attach yourself to wanting a specific outcome for that person, it's really hard to support them in their process in a meaningful way. Instead of helping them, we just start projecting our own thoughts and fears, sometimes without even knowing it. And we can't hold the space the person needs to work through their own thought process because we're too busy in our own minds feeling like, well, they really should choose this one specific path. Because in our minds, it is the right path. And the confusing thing about this is we can really feel like we're protecting our loved one by helping steer them in that direction. But in fact, what happens is it creates more anxious and fear driven energy, and that is just going to be absorbed by the person you're trying to help. They'll sense that energy in you, and it will cause more issues for them in the end. The best thing you can do is handle your own thoughts and feelings first, get to a more neutral place about it before you engage with them and try to help them navigate. So the first thing is check yourself. Are you hoping that they make a specific decision? Are you feeling anxious for them? If so, let it go. As much as you care about them, it is their path, and the most empowering thing you can do is leave them in the driver's seat of that decision. Next is to focus on providing more questions than answers. And this one is super counterintuitive to how most of us behave. Because when you're in that moment and you see someone you care about in pain or struggling to make a decision, your first inclination is to try and fix it. And often, when it comes down to decisions, that means just telling them what decision you think is best for them. But the idea of providing questions, not answers, allows the other person the ability to think through what they want instead of us just telling them what we think is best. If there's anything we've learned in this decision making series, it's that decisions are best made when they come from our own brains, not someone else's. Our lives develop in more meaningful ways when we are making choices from our own alignment, less from a place of trying to please others or just pick the right answer on paper. So maybe you can just be that magical person for your friend that can help guide them back to themselves and trust themselves more as they navigate this decision making process. So I say ask questions, but not just any question. There's a couple examples of questions I find to be most helpful in this situation. First is to ask if they want to talk about it. Do they even want to have a conversation with you about this decision? That's a really big first step to get their consent to even ask them to open up about what's going on for them. We all have different levels of comfort at different stages in our decision making process. So some people need a lot of time to think through what they even want to say before they can say it out loud. Or maybe someone isn't in a place emotionally to share, and that's okay. Give them the time they need. Next is once you have that consent to ask them how they feel. Sometimes we try to jump ahead and immediately validate how we think someone feels without having the full picture. And we could actually be assuming wrong about the emotion the other person is experiencing. Emotions are wild. Sometimes, even if we are sure we know what that other person is feeling, we know them really well, we know exactly what they're experiencing right now, we can actually be way off on those assumptions. And sometimes that can do a little bit of damage. For example, a lot of people could start the conversation with something like, I'm sure you're devastated about that. How can I help? And although that sounds very kind, what if that person isn't feeling devastated? What if they're feeling a completely conflicting emotion to that? Instead, try pausing and taking the time to ask how they're feeling before you jump to validating what you think the other person is feeling. And I know if this is you jumping ahead, you're not doing it because you intend to do anything wrong, but more so because your empathy muscle is so developed for that person and you care about them so much that your brain has already rode that train to whatever emotion you think they might have, and you have felt that discomfort in your body, and you just want them to feel better. But the truth is, you may have rode a different emotional train than your friend did. I can't tell you the number of times someone will be struggling, for example, because a family member has passed away, and they had a really difficult relationship with that person. And they're actually feeling this strange sense of relief that the relative is gone. But someone very kindly comes up to them and says, "Oh my word, you must be so devastated that so and so passed away." And that person all of a sudden feels confused about what they're feeling or possibly even ashamed now because they're not sure that they're having the correct emotion that they're supposed to have. A lot of damage can be done in that situation and it's unintended. So just try not to jump ahead and anticipate the other person's emotions, but first pause and ask a question about how they feel. And I know for some people this sounds really corny, like when you're asking someone how they feel, it sounds like you're playing therapist. But honestly, it doesn't have to be super awkward or strange. It can look very conversational. It can be something like, "Wow, how are you handling everything?" Or, "It looks like you had a lot going on. How are you processing all of that?" Or, "Thanks for opening up about what's going on. How are you feeling about it?" This allows the person to verbally process and hopefully put their feelings about the situation or decision into words. And you may be surprised at what they say. So start off by asking them how they feel. We can leave the floor open for that person to feel any feeling they want to without us directing that ship on any level. Next, you can ask questions about what their thoughts are on that decision that they're trying to make, if that's the struggle they're in. Ask them to share with you maybe what what are the pros and the cons that they're weighing? Or ask something like, what's holding you back on pulling the trigger on that decision? These questions can really help another person get out of that stuck place because they're able to verbally process out loud what's ruminating in their own brain. And once they're able to hear themselves say it out loud, they often are able to achieve clarity on which route is best for them just because they had that moment to talk it through. That happens to me personally a lot. Once I'm able to say it out loud, everything I've been stewing on in my own brain all of a sudden feels like, oh, wait, that makes total sense. I know exactly what I need to do now. Another powerful question you can ask, but be prepared, it could be a heavy one, is what is your biggest fear in this situation? Or what is the worst case scenario for you? Again, sometimes someone can think through this and verbalize it. It can actually make it feel less scary. When it's in our own brains, it can be like this invisible monster. But once it's out loud and you're talking it through with another person, it can take away some of that fear. And you all know I love this question. But this one I think is really powerful when someone's making a decision. If both options were the right option, which one would you pick? It really makes all options neutral in a way that's empowering and it helps the other person to get back to their own essence. And the truth is, each path can be the right path. So helping your loved one see the power and the neutrality is incredibly helpful. Which leads me to the next point, empowering your loved one as they work through their struggle or decision. That is incredibly important. What I mean by this is reminding them of who they are, reminding them of the strengths that you see in them, and how capable they are. When we are stuck in indecision or just on the struggle bus in general, it can be really easy to feel ungrounded and disoriented. The brain starts to find similar things to all link together. And what that can mean in our brain is that it goes and says, okay, wow, you have this one decision you can't decide on. Well, look at all these other areas you haven't decided on that all look the same. And now your brain starts spiraling, right? Or our brains can start just looking for situations where we made decisions we regretted and bring them back to the surface and convince us that this one decision that we're working on, that's going to end up the same way. They're all going to end up bad. But remember, our brains are just machines. They're trying to find the path of least resistance. They're trying to make things efficient for us. And sometimes that means finding trends that are not really based in truth. That's just the brain trying to help us be efficient and put like things together. It's like if you have an orange and a basketball. They're both orange, but you can't eat them both. And they honestly have very little in common, but they look kind of similar. They're both these round orange things. Our brain does the same thing. They're trying to put like things together that sometimes really don't need to be together. So, reminding your loved one of who you know them to be, even saying things like, you've had to make some hard decisions in the past and you did great. I know you can do the same thing this time. Or highlighting their strengths and saying, you really impressed me when you navigated last time. I know you can do that again. You're totally capable of getting through this. Capable is a word I love when helping anyone who is struggling. Reminding them that they are capable is hugely impactful. Often that's a big part of what we need is to trust ourselves to make the decision and to know that we can navigate that hardship. And when we're lacking trust and confidence in ourselves, it's great to have a loved one who has the trust and confidence in us for us. So, reminding them of what they've overcome, or what they've accomplished, or what characteristics they have that are exactly what they need to make the right decision or overcome the struggle, that's what they need to hear. Hype them up like you would if you saw them playing a sport and wanted them to win. You'd be cheering them on. You'd say, like, you got this, you can do this. Do the same thing for your loved ones when they're struggling emotionally or struggling with a decision. Last but not least, ask them how you can support them best. Maybe they won't know in that moment, but it does open the door for when they do know to let you know. And maybe they do know what they need, and you can be that person to support them in that way. And one other note about this is if you are feeling a nudge in your intuition to do something for them while they're struggling, listen to it. Sometimes it's really hard for people to ask for help. And that's when the universe or God comes in. They give us those little nudges to step in and help that other person. And we can end up filling gaps for them in a way that feels very magical and creates a miracle moment for the other person where their needs are met that they didn't even verbalize. So I'm curious, what is something a loved one did for you when you were struggling that was really impactful for you? If you're listening to this podcast on a platform that has comments available, Please leave a comment. Let me know, what did that person do for you that was really impactful when you were struggling to make a decision? I think both Spotify and YouTube allow comments, so you can do that there. Or you can also send me a DM on Instagram. It's at the Love Your Brain podcast. And I can share that with others so that they can see as well. It's always helpful to hear other people's perspectives on what's helpful when you're navigating difficult decisions or struggling. So, thank you so much for coming along in this series of decision making. I've had so much fun putting this together, and next week we'll be starting anew. So, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, and have a great week, guys. I hope you found something helpful here today on the Love Your Brain podcast. Maybe a laugh or a feeling of validation, or maybe just a few moments to have company while you do your laundry. Whatever you take from it, I hope you enjoyed your time and leave feeling empowered to be more you every day. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on the next episode, and leave a review. I'd love to hear what you think. Have a great one.